When my husband discovered that I couldn't inherit any of my father's assets, he erupted in rage. "What do you mean you can't inherit anything?" he screamed. "If that's the case, I have no use for you anymore. I want a divorce right now." His words cut deep, and in that moment, I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Soon after, I exacted my revenge on both my husband and my sister, who had swiftly married each other. My name is Flo, a 32-year-old office worker. I married George, whom I met through a relative 2 years ago. My family, though once wealthy, faced uncertainty over who would inherit since we were all daughters. George was introduced to me as a suitable match who could potentially join our family. After our wedding, George moved in with me at my parents' house, where we lived with my father after my mother passed away. Initially, George seemed kind and respectful towards my father, earning everyone's trust. However, just before our marriage, the relative who introduced us warned me about George's obsession with money. Despite this, I didn't notice any signs of greed in him and proceeded with the marriage. As time went on, George began subtly probing about my father's assets during casual conversations over drinks. My father, being open-hearted, didn't seem bothered by George's curiosity, which momentarily eased my concerns. George's interest also extended to my younger sister, who was lively and outgoing, a stark contrast to my own calm demeanor. Her beauty and charm fascinated him, a fact that didn't escape my notice, stirring up conflicting emotions within me. The relative's concern was rooted in the fear that without me, a plain and unassuming daughter, there would be no one to inherit the family's wealth if something were to happen. I initially thought there was no reason to worry, believing my beautiful sister would secure our family's future. However, it soon became clear why that relative had concerns. My father, always lenient with my sister, allowed her to pursue higher education after high school, including a vocational school after college. Unlike me, she didn't have a specific career goal. Rather, she seemed averse to working. While my mother insisted she find a job right after college, my father disagreed, enabling her to attend vocational school. After completing it, she landed a job at a company owned by a friend of my father's but quit after just 6 months. I was astonished by her reasoning for quitting. "I couldn't show my full potential at that company," she claimed. My mother and I were baffled by her confidence despite her short stint. Nevertheless, my father believed her and swiftly arranged for her to join another company. Soon after, when our mother fell ill and was hospitalized, my sister visited daily, often skipping work. Eventually, she quit again, proclaiming she would care for our mother. However, her idea of caregiving involved idle chatter or smartphone scrolling in the hospital waiting room. I found myself solely responsible for handling our mother's laundry at the hospital and ensuring she had fresh clothes, as my sister offered little help. Though our mother initially enjoyed my sister's company, her condition deteriorated within a month to where conversation became impossible. 2 weeks after this decline, she passed away. Both my father and sister were so devastated that I had to organize the funeral arrangements. Thankfully, our relatives stepped in, and we were able to give our mother a proper farewell. After her death, my sister started working part-time and moved out of our parents' house to live independently. However, her earnings weren't enough to cover expenses, so our father began paying her rent and utilities. It seemed she spent her money frivolously and frequently asked our father for more. While our mother was alive, she had been strict with my sister, so our father didn't provide financial support initially. Yet after her passing, he gave her free rein with money. I didn't see any issue with this arrangement if both my father and sister were content. Even after I married and moved in with my husband at my parents' house, my father continued supporting my sister financially. Unbeknownst to me at the time, my sister was also asking my husband for money, which he readily gave, asking her to keep it secret from me, fearing my reaction. My sister sustained herself with sporadic part-time work and funds from our father and my husband. However, this lifestyle became unsustainable when our father fell ill and required hospitalization. I juggled hospital visits between work and caring for our father, but my sister never appeared at the hospital. Instead, she began calling me, demanding money. "Since I've been getting money from Dad every month, I need you to continue that," she demanded. "The rent and utilities are all paid from Dad's account anyway." Her angry tone surprised me, hearing this for the first time. Despite my anger at her disregard for our hospitalized father, I resisted hanging up, sensing she might be in trouble. "How much are you getting from Dad every month?" I asked, trying to gauge the situation. You need to find a job soon and support yourself. In a grumpy tone, she replied. I was getting $1,000 every month, not including rent. I was stunned by her casual admission. Seeing my adult sister receiving such a substantial allowance, I worried she had no incentive to find work. At first, I didn't see it as a problem, assuming our father would recover soon. However, his condition suddenly deteriorated, prompting me to contact our relatives urgently. The doctor's serious prognosis left me deeply shocked. During such a difficult time, I hoped for support from my husband, but he claimed to be busy with work and rarely visited the hospital. When he did come, his questions were insensitive. Your father's inheritance must be substantial, right? Since it's just you two sisters, you'll split it evenly, he remarked, fixated on the inheritance. I was speechless, realizing my husband's obsession with money, a trait my relatives had warned me about. It left me feeling disgusted. Even when my sister called and I explained our father's critical condition, her concern was solely about money. Forget that, just make sure you send me my monthly allowance. I can't survive without it, she insisted before abruptly ending the call. I was furious with her selfishness, yet worried about a faint male voice I overheard in the background, triggering a sense of unease. A month later, our father passed away, but neither my sister nor my husband were present during his final moments. As I dealt with the funeral arrangements, memories of my mother's funeral weighed heavily on me. To worsen matters, neither my husband nor sister offered any help. My sister didn't even attend the funeral, and though my husband showed up briefly, he quickly left, citing work obligations. Even the relative who introduced us noticed his absence and asked about it. What happened to your husband? It's odd for him to be absent, they remarked. All I could manage was a bitter smile in response. He's busy with work, had to head home, I explained, feeling disappointment welling up inside. After the funeral, as I finally caught my breath, my husband approached with a grin. Finally, how much did you inherit? It must be quite a sum, even if split, he asked eagerly. As warned by my relative before our marriage, it seemed my husband's thoughts were consumed by my father's inheritance. Disappointed, I responded casually, my sister gets $100 million, and I get nothing. I hadn't spoken to my lawyer yet, and with the funeral just behind us, I hadn't sorted out my feelings either. My husband, gleeful about the inheritance, provoked me to the brink of laughter beyond anger. Upon hearing my words, my husband erupted, What? You can't inherit anything. If that's true, I have no use for you anymore. Let's get a divorce right now. Feeling the same way, I retorted, Let's do it. You married me for my father's inheritance in the first place, didn't you? I'll divorce you. With that declaration, I thrust the divorce papers I had prepared towards him. He seemed taken aback, but signed them nonetheless, as if he had expected this outcome. As he finished signing, my ex-husband remarked bitterly before leaving, I'll divorce you, who has no inheritance, and marry your sister Emily to get the $100 million. Undeterred, I promptly filed the divorce papers. Breaking free from my scoundrel of a husband felt liberating. The next day, it seemed my ex-husband had already filed for marriage with my sister Emily. A few days later, he called me, still convinced of his delusion. When are you going to start the inheritance procedures? Give Emily the $100 million as soon as possible, he yelled into the phone. I waited patiently for the call from my ex-husband, refusing to initiate contact myself after he left the house on his own. When his call finally came, I answered in a matter-of-fact tone. Let's discuss it at my place this Sunday. I'll be prepared for the proceedings, I informed him calmly. My ex-husband, believing he was about to receive a windfall, was elated and quickly hung up the phone. Little did he know, I eagerly anticipated the moment he would learn the truth. Over the weekend, both my ex-husband and my sister arrived at my parents' house, visibly surprised to find a lawyer waiting there. Despite their initial shock, my ex-husband attempted to maintain composure. I knew it. You need a lawyer when there's a fortune involved, he remarked smugly. However, the lawyer interjected with a puzzled expression. Before we address the inheritance, there's a matter of property division your ex-wife has claimed against you, the lawyer explained, beginning to display a series of photographs. The photos depicted my ex-husband leaving my sister's house, each one clearly dated. The lawyer continued, addressing my ex-husband directly. These photos serve as evidence of your affair before the divorce was finalized. Therefore, you'll need to comply with the property division. My ex-husband's expression shifted from confidence to disbelief as the reality of his actions sank in. Upon overhearing my ex-husband discussing the inheritance with my sister over the phone, I promptly instructed my lawyer to investigate his infidelity. Despite the solemnity of my father's funeral, my ex-husband and sister met frequently at her house, unaware I was gathering substantial evidence. When the conversation shifted from inheritance to their affair, both were caught off guard. Initially stunned, my ex-husband quickly composed himself and argued back. Property division is trivial compared to the $100 million inheritance. I'll settle it immediately, he retorted arrogantly. However, when the lawyer presented the documents, he signed them without hesitation. I made sure to remind him pointedly, enjoy your life with my sister, who inherits nothing. Since you signed, I'll ensure the property division is collected. Upon hearing she would receive nothing, my sister erupted in disbelief. What? Why is my inheritance zero? I'm supposed to get $100 million, she cried out. My ex-husband, now red-faced, joined in, yelling, there's no way. There has to be an inheritance. I won't let you take it all. The lawyer calmly intervened, beginning to explain the situation to the infuriated pair. Emily is actually the biological child of her late mother from a previous relationship. She was never legally adopted by Shlo's late father, so there is no legal parent-child relationship that would entitle Emily to inherit. Turning to my sister, who appeared bewildered, the lawyer continued, when our parents remarried, you were about 1 year old. I was 6 and clearly remember how happy I was to suddenly have a sister. The revelation sank in slowly as the truth of the situation became clear to both my ex-husband and sister, their anger dissipating into stunned silence. I never imagined my own sister would betray me by stealing my husband. When our parents remarried, they had already been burdened with young children from previous relationships. They believed in balancing their affection and attention between us. My mother treated me as her own daughter, showering me with love, while my father cherished my sister, perhaps indulging her more because she wasn't his biological child. Despite the family dynamics, my mother never adopted my sister, a decision that raised suspicions among relatives who were aware of my father's considerable wealth. They often recommended me for marriage, knowing I was the sole inheritor of my father's assets. If my parents had had children together, the situation might have become even more complicated. However, they deliberately chose not to, likely to avoid future inheritance disputes. Now, I understand that my father financially supported my sister throughout her adult life because he couldn't leave her an inheritance. Legally, neither my sister nor I were officially adopted by our respective parents, but that never mattered to us. We grew up together as siblings, unaware of the legal nuances until now. It seems our parents never disclosed to my sister that they had both remarried before, and today was the first time she learned the truth about our family's complex history. I wondered if my ex-husband grasped the gravity of the situation as his face transitioned from flushed to pale. Not only was he denied the inheritance he expected from my sister, but he was also faced with a property division for which he had already signed the documents. With a pallid expression, he turned to me and asked, was it all a lie? You said $100 million for your sister and nothing for me. Suppressing a laugh, I replied, of course it was a lie. It was payback for your affair. Besides, my father's inheritance was nowhere near $100 million. My normally quiet sister suddenly exclaimed, I've been shopping so much, expecting Dad's inheritance. What about the money Dad was giving me? Will you cover it, sis? You're married and have George to support you now, right? She looked at my ex-husband, who was visibly shaken. However, he shook his head and said, I can't afford that. I spent expecting the inheritance, and now with the property division, I'm stretched thin. After saying this, my ex-husband unexpectedly knelt before me, apologizing profusely. Tilo, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. Can we please get back together? The lawyer, who had been packing up, chuckled at the sight. Where did that arrogant attitude go? He remarked. George pleading on his knees like this is quite the turnaround. After the discussion, my ex-husband and sister left dejectedly, and they soon divorced. My ex-husband, who had remarried with hopes of inheriting my sister's fortune, lost interest in her when she received nothing. He was adamant about the property division and his inability to support my sister. Since he had no assets, I decided he would pay from his monthly salary, as advised by my lawyer, to ensure I received what was due. Meanwhile, my sister, no longer supported by our father, struggled to make ends meet with part-time work. Eventually, her debts piled up, leading her to file for bankruptcy. She moved out of her apartment, and I lost track of her whereabouts. My father's excessive support had hindered her ability to work seriously, and although relatives began suggesting potential suitors for me, I declined. I didn't want another man like my ex-husband. This time, I intended to find a partner on my own terms.